answer to a problem that created an even greater problem, the Class 17 Clayton is quite possibly the most unsuccessful British mainline diesel locomotive ever, notorious for its poor reliability and unrivalled short career. The Class 17s were introduced in 1962 by Clayton Engineering Limited of Hatton in Derbyshire and their subcontractor Bayer Peacock & Co. on behalf of Brell, based at Derby. Famous for their centre cab design, the Class 17s were the answer to the poor visibility provided by previous Class 1s when travelling in their less convenient direction. These issues had been seen previously on the unsuccessful Class 15 and 16s and were most famous on the Class 20 choppers. BR were already in the process of procuring a number of different diesel types under the pilot scheme when they contacted Clayton Engineering about manufacturing a locomotive with a centre cab and low bonnet for maximum visibility. Due to the low bonnet height, the Class 17 required the use of two Paxton 6Z HXL 6-cylinder engines, an engine originally intended for use in rail cars. These engines were noted for their unusual transmissions, that adopted the use of electrical power over hydraulic power, an uncommon choice even in contemporary twin-engine locos. The vast majority of Class 17s were produced by Clayton themselves between September 1962 and February 1965, with subcontractor Bayer Peacock manufacturing only between March 1964 and April 1965. Finished examples were immediately dispatched for use in the north of England and the Scottish region, quickly becoming noted for their poor performance on heavy freight trains and even poorer reliability, traits that shone through even after extensive modifications to their powertrains. These faults came at a massive blow to the design, whose two 6-cylinder horizontal engines had been chosen purely due to their visibility improvement, even though the maintenance of two separate engines would bring larger costs than just one. This decision was questioned by many as there was widespread availability of engines capable of producing sufficient power on their own. In an effort to improve the reliability and overall image of the Class 17, the last two of the Clayton-built locomotives were fitted with a pair of Rolls-Royce Type D engines, producing 450 horsepower. However, these proved to be worse than the Paxman engines, suffering with crankcase failures, and so the decision was made to retrofit the Paxman engines into these two locomotives. Another failure in the Class 17 came from its main design feature, this being its centrally positioned cab. The cab itself featured dual-mirrored driving controls, allowing for easy control in either direction, with large armoured glass driving windows covering the majority of the front and rear walls, and large sliding side windows for all-around visibility. Due to its single cab design being used for driving in both directions, the Class 17 featured the largest driving cab of any British diesel locomotive. However, its size did lead to one major drawback, this being its seating arrangement. At the time, it was necessary for a second man to travel in the cab, and due to the single seating arrangement facing either direction, the second man was either forced to stand or have a heavily reduced vision of the line ahead. Unfortunately, the position of the cab and the long noses at both ends prevented forward visibility directly in front of the locomotive, forward visibility having been a dictating factor in the design of the class to start with. Finding themselves less successful than the infamously ill-fated Metrovic Kobos, which we discussed in the Condor episode, the Class 17s had an overall availability of only 60%, even after extensive modifications to the Paxton engines. Working tests around Tyne Dock hauling iron ore trains proved unsuccessful, with the class proving far too underpowered for the work, and eventually found themselves moved to lighter work across the network. A mix of Blue Star and Red Diamond control equipment between the different manufacturers also made for issues. However, three Class 17s could work in multiples with each other. On an interesting plus note for the class, The fitting of steam heating equipment alongside the electric heating allowed their use on passenger service, the versatility in equipment allowing work on all types of coaching stock available at that time. However, time was ticking for the Class 17, and by July 1968 the first batches had started to be withdrawn from the network, with all having been removed by 1971. This incredibly short working life meant that many examples had a working life of less than 5 years, comparable only to the BR standards of the 1960s. Most had met the cutter's torch by 1975, however 9 found themselves suggested for conversion to battery power, with 3 briefly finding their way to Derby Research Centre. However, all 3 later would find their way to the scrapyard. Luckily, one Class 17 did slip its way through the net. After being withdrawn in 1971, D8568 found itself employed at Hemmelite in Hemel Hempstead and Ribblesdale Cement in Lancashire. It was eventually secured for preservation and is now fully restored and owned by the Chinnor and Princess Risborough Railway. Notably, the Class 17 did make an appearance in a certain TV show under the guise of Derek, who also suffered from engine problems. A constant thorn in British Railway's side, the Class 17 has gone down as a laughingstock in the eyes of many railway enthusiasts, with few willing to sing its praises. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this episode of Off the Rails, why not leave a like and consider subscribing so that you don't miss future videos.